This thing go live. And what do you know? By the magic of the internet, this thing still works and we are live. So,
all right.
Welcome everybody. I am your host, RJ Carter, Senior Managing Editor here at criticalblast.com. And for those who come into the chat, I want to remind you we do not have a super chat button, and we will talk a little bit more about that later when there's actually somebody here to tell. But for now, I'm going to get on here and share this out to Twitter and let them know to come join us.
I'll do that too.
Thank you. Because people are probably watching you a whole lot more than they're watching me. But I've got the followers for it, so
yeah.
You know what's going to happen is somebody's going to do something stupid in the world of comic books. Dan Slott! and Ethan's going to open up a live stream, and like everybody's going to go to the Blue Light Special.
That's right. Oh yeah, and it's that whole thing. It's kind of, for me, it's a thing because you're never. Social media has become a problem, not particularly like a lot of not as much as changed as people think. It's that we're seeing how the sausage is made, and yes, that's really disturbing people. And it was no different with when Sean Gordon Murphy, he was doing that cover for Doug, and people online started to attack him over it because they didn't agree with Doug's politics and whatever, and then Sean panics. He likely got DC probably went, "Hey buddy, you can't, we don't like this heat," and so he pulled the cover, and everybody's very upset, as they should be. I don't I know the First Amendment is all about the government, but the people, we've got to be careful not to be censoring each other either, especially when it's dumb, when it's, who cares, that wasn't worth it. But on the other hand, that was last week. Then this week, it's because, Dan Slott's being Dan Slott. I don't know. This isn't new. He's been saying he's addicted to the politics and screaming on Twitter, and he has been for a long time. Now, I don't read a lot of his stuff. I really, really liked his She-Hulk run. That was quite a long time ago. I honestly don't have time to read comics very often because I write them. But I loved it so much that I just ignore his Twitter because it's like Mel Gibson, He's done some things, but his movies are awesome, so I'm just going to ignore it. I don't care,
You probably don't have to worry about ignoring Dan Slott's Twitter because he's probably blocked you anyway.
No, he hasn't. I don't know.
How did you slip under the radar? Because he has us blocked.
Hell if I know. I don't know. He's never blocked me before. And ironically, I don't follow him or nothing. And but I have no idea how I slipped, but I don't even know how blockchains work. It blocks followers of followers.
Yeah, it absolutely does. You can download a list from Twitter of you hit the person you don't like, and there's an app that says, okay, give me all these IDs of whoever's following this person. And then you can run it through a BlockBot app that's free to download. Say, here's my list, go out and block these. And it comes out and says, okay, you don't have to worry about ever seeing any of these people.
I'm a weird creator because if I would probably be funneled out, I'm followed for unknown reasons by a bunch of pros he would like, pros. I don't know why. And so if it like was just an automatic chain, it'd like block everybody he works for quite a bit. But so I probably get funneled out. Kind of like Tusi and stuff, he has his own little deal. But, that I'm in that, I think I'm in that hoop. So it keeps me out of the blockchains.
It changes tracks so fast and so frequently that it's hard to keep track of. I really thought that, okay, the weekend was all, before the weekend started, it was all Sean Gordon Murphy and what's her name? Tess Fowler. Forgettable. That to that degree that I couldn't remember her name.
I don't know.
And I thought, okay, everybody's going to take the weekend off, and then Monday it's going to be all cylinders firing. What the hell's going on with Sean Gordon Murphy? It's
Right.
like, Sean Gordon who? Haven't you heard what Dan Slott's done?
Right.
So,
No, and the same people that were angry when Sean got the book, then it turns to Dan Slott, and I feel like, it's a lot of the same. It's similar, at least. It's a little bit similar to where Doug says some things that offends one side, and they want to give him trouble with his business, his art and stuff, because they don't like what he's saying. But then, Dan Slott, it's just the complete reverse of it. And I mean, I don't follow. I highly likely have Dan Slott muted because I don't want to hear it. I'd mute anybody. I don't care what their politics is. I mute anybody talking about politics. I don't care.
yeah,
and
it gets in the way of life.
Right. And I think that's and I think we're going to get there. I mean, there's been a lot of talk, especially within indie comics recently, the past 6 months, maybe, of cutting out the politics, because it became to where 2017, 2018, politics infused the mainstream industry, which I've never really cared about what they do. But they're so hit and miss all the time anyways. It's not like this was a big turnaround for me, but it really infused it pretty bad, and all media to some degree. And but the reaction was almost identical, but in the opposite direction. But it was kind of the same idea, and and that's kind of natural because people are trying to push back to center. So they do the same thing, but in reverse. But the problem is, it eventually became to where indie comics didn't become less political. They just become the opposite political of the other one.
Yeah, and then they got people in the middle who there's an old Bugs Bunny cartoon. I don't know if you've seen it, where there's these two large mustached chefs that are both wanting to cook rabbit, and he's getting them to fight with each other. And he's got if he tweaked my little pink tomato nose, I would whisper, 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 whisper. And the chef gets mad and goes over and bangs the other one on the head. And then Bugs says, "Oh, if he'd banged me on the head with his spoon, I would whisper, whisper, whisper." And he just has them going back and forth. And that's what you got in social media is whole people playing each other, people playing angry people off of each other to make them angrier.
Oh yeah, definitely. And one thing now, and I'm not going to say I don't get angry about things, but it's professionalism that angers me. I think if I was a friend of Dan Slott's, I would go, dude, you've got to lower. You're preaching to a choir. The only people who are going to listen to you at this point are going to already think exactly like you. You're not benefiting anything. You've got to chill out. And I kind of made a proclamation this weekend because of people, kind of complaining about whoever it is that they are having trouble with. At this point, it's everybody against everybody. That comic book artists should complain in comic book form, right? So I tweeted this picture that I drew. I typed what I was going to say, and I was like, dude, you can't say it in a tweet and not draw it, because that's the whole point of the tweet. So I drew a short little comic strip that everything needs to be. And and I made the joke that I said, if everybody argued in comic strip form, all reactions would come 2 years later after a Patreon or a Kickstarter program. But that's right, Tony. Oh yeah, but let me thank you, Tony. He's going to keep me on track for this. Professionalism. I like professionalism, and it goes by many different names, but the idea being that professionalism is a great way that even if we all disagree, that we can get things done still, because there's this code of conduct, right? And that's really what professionalism is. and it should be universal, but it's this code of conduct. You don't say this, you do this, you try to be, reasonable, being reasonable. And that was thrown out because people got so angry that they said this professionalism or this political correctness or this whatever it is getting in the way. And so everybody just dropped it all. And we haven't got nothing done since then because, there's just not this reasonable. And now, people will use professionalism. They'll try to exploit it and say, well, that wasn't professional. It's like, hold on. Even professionalism has its limits. But we're not even using a little bit. But what, I don't know that lady's name, whatever it was, that was with the Fowler? Jess Fowler?
Tess Fowler.
Tess Fowler.
They come no fouler than Tess.
Yeah. That was unprofessional, but also, was it Don Coates? He kind of jumped on the dog pile. That was, also unprofessional. Well, for one thing, the Don Coates, I think it's Don Coates. I don't know.
You think it's Donnie Cates, the Venom guy?
Ooh, the Venom guy. That was very, very unprofessional. He works for Marvel at a very competing comic book to Sean Gordon Murphy. The Venom at Marvel versus the Batman series by Sean Gordon Murphy. That is very unprofessional. And if this was any other time, everybody would go, whoa, dude, no, you can't try to politically take down your commercial competition and then pretend it was some moral thing. And but and that's I think everybody has to be careful about that because it's so easy to when someone's on one side to look at what these people did with the Sean Gordon Murphy and say it's easy to see that was wrong, but people immediately can turn around and do the same thing and not see it as wrong as their own side. And for me that Dan Slott and Sean Gordon Murphy is a little bit similar. Now Dan Slott was, kind of the direct antagonist. But this is not new for Dan Slott. And, for me, there's a little bit of, when you're friends with someone and they do something stupid all the time, but you just go, they crazy. Yeah. We need more of that. We need a little bit of...
You can be the grumpy old man. You can be the grumpy old man if you're Harlan Ellison. The guy made a career of that, and everybody loved him.
Right.
Dan Slott's no Harlan Ellison. So, for aggressively relaxing, who's asking what happened, we're just kind of trying to get our bearings because we were ready for the Tess Fowler, Sean Gordon Murphy fallout this morning, and it was Dan Slott. We had our channels changed.
That's right. Yeah. And now, and in the end, I know little to nothing about the mainstream industry as a whole. I mean, I when I was a little kid, I dreamed of drawing Batman, but when I was about 13 or 14, maybe 15, I think was when Nightfall happened and the death of Superman, and they were neat at the time, but then by the time they were over and like everything zips back to normal, and then there's time retcon. Well, DC didn't really retcon. They didn't do the time shifts. They just all of a sudden everything was different back then during post-crisis. There's like 12 timelines throughout post-crisis and none of them match. But I got burned out. I was like, oh, this just goes on forever. It doesn't mean anything. And I went to indie comics and stuff like that, and to where these comics meant something. They could do 300 Cerebus, 300 issues in a row, and it means something. Everything meant something. This was an ongoing story by one person, and it wasn't about selling action figures or Hostess cupcakes. This was about storytelling, and mainstream just can rarely do that. There are, and now I will show up for things like Ed Brubaker's Catwoman run. That was a really good one. I loved it. And there's runs I like, but overall, the industry is what it is. When you're trying to sell action figures, there is only so much integrity you can have, And I even love those characters though. That wouldn't be I'm not I love the Batman universe, the Gotham universe and stuff. I love the potential of them, and when really Frank Miller and all these guys, when they get a hold of them, they can do well. That's like the Joker movie. You can do amazing art with these characters. For me, it's I lean towards DC more, even though Marvel has done amazing things with their characters. It's a little different than what I'm interested in. I kind of like to where it's less about the specifics, like, I'm Tony Stark and I put on a robot, but to wee and fly around. I'm less interested in that and more like psychological stuff that DC usually does kind of better. I mean, there's X-Men, which I always see almost as an alternate universe of Marvel. It's not really the MC, the same as the MC. They intermingle, but they've done some of it. But anyways, having said all of that, in the end, Marvel Comics do as they do. Marvel and DC, it is what it is. They're owned by the two largest entertainment conglomerates in the world. To expect integrity with such behemoths is, baffling. And so, in the end, I've always leaned towards indie, which indie hasn't done superheroes very well. That is true. It's never, it's always a parody or something. Because even the best of the best, which Boys and stuff like that, it's like, what if DC Comics, that's essentially it. Boys was basically Watchmen from a different angle. But
Tony's got a great point here.
What's that?
Tony's got a great point here about how all the cartoons of our childhood were just extended commercials for G.I. Joe toys and Transformer toys. And in fact, it was enough that Congress had to pass a law with the FCC that there had to be some sort of educational purpose on television for kids. And that's why you would get these, these little PSAs. And it's also why at the end of G.I. Joe, you would get the moral of the story all the time. It was like, today on G.I. Joe, Meat Hook couldn't get the claw hammer out of the tree that somebody had left there to rust. So, and the more you know. And
Hey, kids, I'm Mr. T. Don't smoke crack. Could you not?
Exactly.
Yeah, and ironically, it killed. That didn't totally kill, but by the time it was early 2000s, they killed children's entertainment when they said, "Oh, it has to be this much educational," and they're like, and the entertainment people said, "What if we just don't?" And they almost. It almost moved entirely to Cartoon Network and stuff like that because it wasn't feasible. But no, Tony is 100% right. It was to sell action figures only. And in fact, some of the biggest cartoons of the 90s, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, they only planned to do 6 episodes to sell action figures. But the kids liked the show so much that they had to keep making them. And I remember, Dino Riders and stuff like that. Definitely.
They kept making them, which let them make newer characters, which let them make newer action figures. So they could keep churning them out. And that's all the comic books are really these days, is stories to show use of characters to maintain trademarks so you can continue to use that mark for action figures. Now, I think DC is going to run into a bit of a problem here soon. If you're familiar with the run that happened on Batman a couple weeks ago because of this new character, Punchline. I don't know what DC is going to be able to do with that character because there are other characters named Punchline being published by different companies. Obviously, there's the book by Antarctic. Now they can say, well, this is a completely different kind of character. But I think somebody with a stronger case is going to be Ted Sikora over at Hero Tomorrow. He does a fantastic book called Tap Dance Killer, which just really shows how crazy storytelling can be in comics and be good with fantastic art. And they have, guess what? A gangster homicidal killer with a clown theme named Punchline. That's DC's biggest benefit would be lawyers. But I have a feeling it's not even going to be necessary because they were obviously looking and going, wow, Harley Quinn made a lot of money. And if you know anything about DC, they never do a character once
there's like 5 bat, or those 2 Batwomans and like 6 or 7 Batgirls and 4 or 5, no 4 Robins. They go, hey, why not play that song again? And so yeah, they're trying to make another Harley Quinn.
And they have to make another Harley Quinn because they made such a big deal about how now she's, emancipated from breaking up with the Joker in that horrible relationship they had.
Yeah.
And she's a much better woman now, and she's a symbol. If she goes back,
right.
And there's a backlash there.
And I think it worked I think there's a good reason to why, whenever it was Terry Dodson did his run. It's one of my favorite Harley Quinn in mainstream, the main canon. And it was the kind of the beginning. She first appeared in Batman Adventures, but that don't really count. But her solo series, I really, really liked it. And I think, it was utility wise, because Joker in the comics, it don't make sense that he has a girlfriend. He's not exactly
no.
And it's not just they go, well, he is a murderer. And it's like, yeah, but he's not just, he's one of those dudes you just don't see having a relationship with anybody at all or wanting it. He's a very loner, weird guy. He's the Joker.
Batman.
Right. And see, it doesn't really make sense that he would have a girlfriend, Harley, but almost her entire canon in real comics was away. I don't think no, because her first appearance in real canon, she was already like ditched him, and it continued from there. Then she met Poison Ivy and stuff. And so yeah, they're trying to suddenly launch this new, but they've been doing a lot of that, trying to either replace characters or repurpose them, and instead of creating something new. Some of it's cool. Mask of the Phantasm, they were trying to pull a Harley Quinn by taking and putting it into the main canon. I did not see how that went. But they also did Arkham Knight, trying to put him into main canon from the games. And
he ended up being a she.
Who did he end up being?
A she.
Oh, really?
They brought the Arkham Knight in. Not only that. Okay, Arkham Knight, they gave her an origin, and they showed her being born in Arkham Asylum. And guess who delivered her?
Harley Quinn.
And the Joker. So what? I'm like, how old are all these people now?
I didn't even think about, DC has a huge how old are people problem. Because, they had done the thing to where Batman or Superman appeared 5 years prior to the main present canon, Batman 10 or something like that. But he has like a son that's like 14 or 15. You're like,
exactly.
When did that happen? It's just because they didn't care.
It all happened to me the minute that Marv Wolfman and George Perez introduced Nightwing.
Yeah.
Because at that minute, a clock started ticking, and they're like, oh, he's graduated. There's a new Robin. Oh, right. Batman's gone through 5 of them now.
Yeah.
What do they last? 2 months each?
Right. And see, in post-crisis, it kind of worked. So you're like, okay, Batman's roughly 35 when Dick Grayson becomes Nightwing. And he looked 35. That totally makes sense. And they always had him, he'd take off his shirt and his back's all scarred and stuff. And so you go, oh, fine, him 25 to 35 with Dick Grayson, that totally makes sense. And the ages matched up. And then you had Tim Drake and stuff, and you're like, okay, he's 40 now. Batman would still be fine at 40. 45, sure. Okay, he has to be roughly 50. And you go, that's still fine. He's 50. It's been almost going on 30 years of him being Batman. And in post-crisis, that totally made sense, and had to be, because so many people went from child to adult in this time. But then when they didn't want to reboot Batman, but wanted to reboot the rest of the DC universe and just did it, and then you're like, whoa, you can't do that, because Barbara's portrayed as a 17-year-old girl who did everything that a 35-year-old one did. And you're like, but how? Was that a year that she was Batgirl, then got crippled, then got the thing in her back, and suddenly, it didn't make no sense. But
Yeah,
so
well,
yeah.
none of it makes sense because it's in comic book time. So
Yeah, and you
anyway,
know, and that's like with my comic, my biggest, all of that stuff is kind of a lot of the motivation. I I liked superhero comics when I was a kid. I grew up and did everything but that, and I kind of got a little bit back into comic books just because of those runs, like Ed Brubaker and Peter Palmati and Justin Gray's run on Power Girl. And I was like, these are really interesting, but they're totally destroyed by the very next person that takes over. There's too many writers. So many writers, nobody's in control, and they're always going to destroy each other because each has a whole new take on it. And I was like, how awesome would it be to see that type of universe, that idea of a shared universe with a bunch of superheroes written by one person, seen from the beginning to the very end of it. And so that's saving the world's entire concept is I show the beginnings, the origins of these superheroes. It's mainly the main two characters you see I post everywhere, Kira and Nora. It's seen through their eyes mainly. And with my first campaign, there's an ash can that, because I was like, well, it really focuses, you'd almost think it's just a comedy funny book with superhero ideas if you just read that first issue. And the second issue too, it gets a little bit into where you start to get hints of it, but it takes me probably till issue 3 or 4 to where you go, wait, and there's this darker, bigger thing going on. So I did the ash can with Tony Sizzle, who was talking earlier, and Peter Palmati. And they handle two characters that are kind of central to this bigger deal. And it's ironic because I'm not even a big fan of event comics like 0 Hour and all that, because they always feel like Crisis of Infinite Earths, like one of the first. I loved it because it was like so impactful. Even today, you read that and you go, ooh, that's, got some gumption to it. The 1 millionth time someone's tried to retell that story, it's gotten a little old. But that is inherent to Marvel and DC and anybody. Any shared universe, there's these things, the god creature, whether it be Darkseid or the Thanos. These types of things, there's these things that are always inherent. So I kind of borrowed from them to, but with one run. It'll probably 20 issues. I don't know if I'll make that. I got one down.
At least you know where you're going.
Right, but I have an idea of 20 issues. I mean, I would love to do 100, just, telling more detail of the story. But I want to do 20 that will probably have to tell the whole story. But if, I might only get to 5. If I get to 20, though, and I'm still like, oh, this is great, I can continue on just like Marvel and DC does. But yeah, my real goal is to do a 20-issue run that is the birth, life, and death of a superhero universe. So you get that whole story arc all combined together and stuff. And well, technically not death, but cataclysmic event, type deal.
Sure.
Can they save the world? We'll see. Well, hey, that's a good catch line, and actually, I didn't even think about that. But yeah, that's the idea, and so yeah, that was a lot of the motivation behind it. When I, and in some of it, I read a comic, and there's smaller micro influences through there because Ghost World, Daniel Klaus's Ghost World.
Yeah,
I loved the girls' interactions because they felt real. They weren't censored. They weren't boiled down. This is how 2 teenage girls might talk when nobody's there. And that interests me. I would never claim to have reached even 1/16th of how good he is, because you'd swear he's a 16-year-old girl writing it. I don't even know how he did that, how he got into the head space of that. But that was at least a goal. That was something I was aiming towards, to capture that, where you go, hey, these kind of feel, and that's where the comedy comes from. I don't want to make fun of the world or make fun of the characters, It's just the people are funny. Like Kira and Nora are kind of funny people, but I'm not making fun of them or anything. They're just saying funny stuff. Funny situations happen to them because they're they're kind of normal people.
Life is funny.
That is
watching. Right. For everybody watching, we are talking with Tonic Mole, and we're going to delve into Saving the World, which is his Indiegogo superhero comic book project. If you look down in the description there, you will find a link to that Indiegogo. We encourage you to go to it. There's just a few more days here before that one closes out. The good news is that he has reached double the goal on it, so the book is going to happen. That does not mean you should back off on it because you're trying to not reach a goal. It means you should jump in with everybody else. This is a bandwagon. Get on it. It's rolling.
That's right. I need money.
Yes. You may also notice that if you have the hankering to hit one of those super chat buttons because you're just, you're addicted to them from all those others, we don't have them. We're not allowed to have them yet. We're still building up our subscriber base. So if you want to hit that subscribe button and ring that bell for notifications, as the saying goes, trademark, patent pending, we would definitely appreciate it. Besides which, if you just put any cash down now, this guy would just come right along and grab it, is what I'm told. So we try not to let him have any more of our cash. We need all of ours as well. If you are a merchandise kind of person, though, or you just want to help us out, the easiest and cheapest way to do it is to visit that website on the first link, criticalblast.com. We put up reviews and interviews and news every day, and you don't have to spend a dime for it. We give it to you for free. Let the advertisers pay for it. That's what they're there for. But if you do want merchandise, we've got a t-shirt store you can hit. We also are a publishing industry. You don't care about my Post-it notes, so I will take that off. We have our fantasy anthology on Amazon called Gods and Services. This is the short story collection. We have stories in here from Ross Baxter, Ira Bloom, Laura Campbell, Aristo Kavaras, John Della Roz, David Peterson, Zach Smith, Michael Tierney, and Catherine Traylor. Edited by me, R.J. Carter. And this is available on Amazon. This is the story of the little curio shop that pops up out of nowhere. And it sells trinkets and curios, and every one of them has a god attached to it. So when you buy it, this god is now obligated to make your life better, whether you want it to or not. And by the way, the shop disappears if you try to return it. So caveat emptor indeed. Some interesting tales in here. And also, just a few months ago, we published our first hardcover young adult novel. This is Bulletproof Origins by Stephen J. Mitchell. And this is also available on Amazon from Critical Blast Publishing. This is about a young boy, 16-year-old boy, Cody Haywood, who wakes up on his birthday to find out he is, as the title says, bulletproof, impervious to harm. So since there are superheroes in his world, he decides he's going to become one of them. Problem is that Cody has roughly a ferret on pixie sticks. So he has a focus issue, and it gets in his way, which is going to hurt him because there's a group of terrorists that said, oh my gosh, there's a bulletproof guy out there. Let's get him and find out what makes him bulletproof so that we can be bulletproof. So if Cody can pull it together with a little help from his friends, he might just be a hero. So that is also on Amazon, Stephen J. Mitchell. Do check it out. But the main topic tonight is Tonic Mole. Enough shilling for Critical Blast. Focus issue. Yes. Stephen hangs around me enough through my emails and tweets that he understands the kind of focus issues that I have. I'm not saying he based it on me, but see you, Cecil. Just dropped him, trying to take him off the laptop there. But for Tonic Mole and Saving the World, we have two female heroes, and I love their superhero names because they have absolutely none, but they wear costumes anyway.
Yes. Yeah.
So what drove that decision?
Well, mainly because there's no good ones. So like every time I see a superhero that's like not DC or Marvel, I've never, there's almost none that the name I'm like, oh, that's totally going to stick. It just because DC and Marvel have put out so many superheroes that you're always going to sound like someone else. It's kind of like with putting the word dead in a superhero name. it's not going to work at this Deadshot, Deadpool, Dead, it's very difficult. And so I had tried to come up with a name and it all sounded generic. And I was like, I'm just not going to. And then as I started writing and I said, I'm just not going to. But then the characters kind of explained why as I wrote. So as they fight crime and whatever it is they do. These Kira especially, she grew up in a comic book store and all this stuff. And it kind of jokes about that she has been preparing for the very unlikely chance that she becomes a superhero her entire life, that type of deal, because she reads all comics all day. But she's an awkward person who's been ignored her whole life. She doesn't stand out in a crowd or anything like this. She's just kind of moved through life like a ghost. And so even when she puts on this super suit and stuff, I have that it's persistent, at least for a while. Eventually things change, but for several issues there's this deal. So there's an on-running joke that the police believe that they may come across, they've defeated someone, and they think they're just two girls who were cosplaying that got caught in crossfire or something like that. They always assume that something else. Oh, well, ladies, you need to, get out to the side. We have this handled. And so there's this idea. So they don't have to have superhero names because nobody would remember who they were in the first place. And so there's that idea that if nobody cares or notices you, you don't really need to have a superhero name in the first place. And there's some of that. And there's a lot of jokes of them trying to come up with one. Like they both try to name each other throughout as the series go on, but nothing sticks. I think at some point, Nora's going to start calling Kira the Ginger Avenger, and there's tons of other things. But and it is also because all the names I come up with were kind of comedic or something. And I'm like, yeah, but this comic is, hopefully funny. That's part of the intent when I write some. But it's not supposed to be a comedy. So, you're not supposed to just go, that was funny and toss it. There's threads of narrative that will grow over time. And I'm hoping to hook people I try to put in that you care for these characters, that you're interested in them. And there's a little in the first issue, especially with, what is going on? With their origins, you get because this first issue will show the origins of both Kira and Nora's a little shorter. I focus more on Kira than I do with Nora, but there's a reason that you'll see as the comic goes on. I kind of jump back to it because her pacing, it's a little bit, you can know everything about Kira. Nora, I have a little bit more interesting emotional twists and stuff that I gotta feed it out a little slower. And so, but you get the fundamental idea of both of these characters in the first issue, and you see how they meet in their first little crime fighting deal. And so yeah, that's where we begin. That's the fundamental idea.
So are you doing the writing and the art, or how are you dividing up the labors here? I mean, you mentioned other people are involved.
Oh yeah. So I do the writing and the interiors, and then I had my buddy Illustrator Monk did the cover, and then Faust did the back cover. So there's a lot of group of us that just kind of hang out and stuff, and so on Twitter. And so even though I could in theory do the whole thing, like Illustrator Monk, his art is just so much better that it makes a good cover. And I was like, man, that takes a lot of weight off me. I can just draw the interiors and be happy and not try to do a cover that every line matters on that cover. On the interior, you can kind of get away with a little bit. And I always felt, Illustrator Monk's kind of like if I was really, really good at drawing. Like if I was really good, that's who you got, Illustrator Monk. I'm like his lesser version, so it works out. But yeah, I do the main interior. So, and that kind of helps budgeting because I can hire a cover artist or have someone do something, or I can do it myself. And that was like the $500 deal. That makes it, I can do that. And I see people with really high budgets, and I'm like, indie comics, I don't know. Maybe it's not a good idea to do. More people, and not everybody can do it. So I would never say, if you can't do it all yourself, get the hell out of here. No. That's what's cool about crowdfunding is that writers can now make comics, which was not ever true. It was not going. If a writer could not make a comic, they could not afford to. It was unreasonable to try. Now they can, and so that is very interesting. For me, though, that you take huge risks as a writer. Though it's not easy. It's just possible, but not easy. For me, I could do it all if I wanted, but I really like a lot of the artists I work with, and so having the opportunity to work with artists, that's really cool. And so I hope to. I mean, it's going pretty good. $1,000 or $1,000.
Yes, let's get there.
Yeah, why not? 1,000 is for me and my budget is a huge success. It's equivalent of $10,000 for these other guys because they need $10,000. I don't even need $1,000 to be honest. 5 would get me there, but this gives me buffer. I could my second issue is taken care of essentially with with this first issue.
Well, a lot of writers that I've talked to, they don't have the advantage that you've got of being able to draw it as well as write it. So they have to have somebody else draw it. And guess what? You can't crowdfund that. You've got to pay that guy up front.
Yeah.
So you're already in the hole before you start showing stuff on crowdfunding.
And and that has been a big problem that some other friends that are writers are certainly having. And it's not that, but it's not just that you have to pay these guys up front. A lot of them are bizarrely expensive within the indie comics, and I don't know how to feel like that. On one hand, on the artist side, that's great because these indie artists that wouldn't have a chance, might not be able to get into DC or Marvel, can make good money. But on the other hand, it feels a little exploitive because a lot of it is because of isolation, that a lot of young writers, or not even young writers, but new writers don't know how much is normal to get paid. That's all I can fathom. You can hire, in some cases, you could hire a pro cheaper than you could hire some indie artists. I mean, totally.
I don't even know what the pay trade is. I've heard the $1,000 cover value being tossed out there, but I don't know if a page rate's like $300 a page or $20 a page or what it is. I wouldn't. I'd be going in blind.
It's in the middle. Like a cover, $300 to $400 for a really good artist with anywhere from no name recognition to a little bit. That's on like indie comics. That would be pretty normal, but they got to be pretty good. A page rate, $100 about. Pencil and inks. People say $100 for pencils and then like $50 on top of that for inks. Nobody gets that. It's always 100 to 120, but it depends on the artist. Now, if you're getting a really high-end technical artist, the price goes up. And so, I know some guys that might be, I know some guys that are probably like they'd be an $80 to $100 range. And then I know guys that are closer to 200. But to get closer to that 200 in indie comics, you got to be pretty good. I mean, like impressive. Like it's bizarre you don't work for DC or Marvel or Dark Horse or somebody.
So if you're looking already at if you're looking at a 22-page comic, you're in the hole $2,500 plus whatever you got to pay for the cover.
Yeah.
And then you say, hey guys, I've made a comic book. Let's crowdfund it. If you make $1,000, you didn't cover it.
And there's a lot of amateur artists, because there is, there's degrees. There's a hobbyist artist who They might be good in the future, but right now, maybe not. They don't have a lot of skill or control. Anatomy, maybe not good. There's a hobbyist. Then you go to, and it'd be like a amateur artist. They're pretty good. You need a little more time. Then you have what would be an indie artist. Sometimes, there's a huge array of, maybe their style is more weird, so they wouldn't fit in with mainstream. Sometimes they're just still learning and stuff. And then you have a pro. I've seen hobbyists that cost more than, like, where they're like, oh, I do it for $250 a page. I'm like, really?
Okay.
I mean, is that wrong? I don't know. I mean, if they get that money. However, if they're trying to, I think that it's not that there's no moral obligation for them to not accept something. That is, they're not doing anything wrong. However, for the industry as a whole, it is a problem, because you have people trying to kickstart a comic that maybe isn't as great as they think it is, or the art isn't on the level it needs to be, but they need $5,000. And it's like, oh boy, without a political movement behind you, you're not going to get it. People are going to have to be buying it because they're angry at something. And, that only lasts for so long.
Right. That doesn't sell a second issue.
No, it certainly doesn't, because the hype dies down, which, that's what, and me and some other guys, we were talking about that, how, Indiegogo and Kickstarter are great for that boost of hype right out the door, but only if you don't really care about making comics, because you can only do one every few months. There's this huge gap. And for, like, if someone who's in the trade business where they do a 100-page comic, well, it's perfect. It's really ideal. There's no reason to do something else. But it's not as great for monthly and bi-monthly. So, it's great for launching. Like, I plan on launching my first, hopefully just 2 or 3 issues through Indiegogo and or Kickstarter campaigns to get going, because the hype, the hype in marketing is really good to get a base. But then I have to go somewhere else, because I want to release comics too quickly for doing perpetual campaigns. It would kind of be a nightmare trying to do it like that and keep a steady issue release, because I have 20 issues I want to do. I can't be 90 years old going, I'm shipping issue number 10. I got to speed this thing up. But I have to have the time to release a comic every 2 months. Bi-monthly is really ideally what I'd want. I mean, back in the 90s, that was normal. There was quarterlies, but that was more those horror type anthologies.
And they were bigger.
Yeah, they're much bigger. But nowadays, it's like one a year. I'm like, I don't think you're really a comic book artist. I think you just like a hobby type deal. And that's not counting, the people that release books. That's almost a new medium in a way, to just doing graphic novels. Well, graphic novels aren't that new, but, so there's certainly comics that are justifiable and a pretty interesting way of doing it. But yeah, I would like to, Terry Moore talked about it, how you have to do, floppies are just so people are constantly being fed your content. They don't forget about you. And, I feel that's indies is missing that. People struggle beyond 2 or 3 issues because people have forgotten and moved on to the next big thing. And
I see so much talent in, if you want to call it Comicsgate for the core of it, but the whole independent crowdfunded movement. I see so much talent in that, both in the writers and in the artists. I see them not going corporate in the short term, at least, simply because of where they are and what the climate is right now. Says, yeah, you're a great technical guy, but no way are we going to be associated with you because, people will quit buying all our other books or complain about it. So I basically see that there's going to be another image come out of all of this. Someone's going to have to realize that independently, we can't do this on a schedule that allows us to continue. We can't sell these books at $25 a pop every 8 months.
Right.
So I see that somehow there's going to be a house come out of this, some sort of a publishing house that's going to bring all these people together. I see a distribution method will come out of this that will take care of the international distribution problems, how expensive they are. I was talking about this with earlier this week with Kami Mark and his book, and we hit on the idea of what if you printed in the U.S. and you printed in the U.K. and the only thing you shipped internationally was a stack of signed covers to the printer,
right,
on one package, and then they just took those covers and wrapped your other thing around it, and then shipped domestically within the UK for your UK stuff, and the same in the US, shipped domestically to the US. You'd cut down your international shipping rates exponentially. But
and
it's going to be 5 years, I think, but I see it coming.
Yeah, and there's a few, and indie. Well, not indie. This has always been a problem. Like indie, like Image or Dark Horse, and then at some point, very low print run comics became called indie, and that words become new things as they go, but it becomes very hard to talk about because you're saying people use the term indie for literally anything that's not Marvel DC, which is vaguely true. But back in the 90s, there was underground comics was, though usually subversive satire and stuff, but not always. That was a better example, and I think makes it more apparent of the hurdles of, because like with international shipping and stuff, where you're printing them over there, for the biggest the highest tiers, even then they're selling 300 issues, and you open up to international and you might sell a few hundred more. It really depends on crowdfunding, because these low print run type deals aren't super cost effective. You can do newsprint and stuff that's cheap, but nobody's doing that. No, very few people are doing that. So you're still looking at $1.50 to $2, and then over there it could be even more. But you're still printing on such a low scale that's dependent on the ecosystem of crowdfunding, that the comics cost so much that it justifies the print. Before an underground comic, if you sold 50 issues or 100 or 200 issues, even 300, 500, you weren't a comic book maker. You didn't do nothing. Your friends bought some or something. It wouldn't even register. Now sales have dropped considerably, so even DC are releasing things that wouldn't be considered barely, scratching the surface. But even then, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles were selling 150,000 issues before the cartoon or action figures or any of that. Yeah. And even with
out of their garage when it first came out. I mean, it was just literally low quality. Let's make a parody of Daredevil and Ronin, and deal with turtles. And I'm 52. I'm the new 52 is what I like to say.
I
got a few more months left of it. And so I was in college when this was happening, and I got to see not only the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, but also the Kung Fu Kangaroos and the the hamsters, the gerbils, the Pork Knight, the Nat Rat, everything that was coming out right and left. It was just you couldn't keep up with it, and everyone was like, maybe this is going to be the next Turtles. And I had some of those black and white Turtles. And I'm kicking myself for not having those black and white Turtles anymore. But those guys they pretend like they're not, but they're extraordinary businessmen, because they handled, not only did they shoot that comic to 100,000 before anything. I mean, before it was, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, they succeeded beyond expectations before they exceeded even further beyond expectations. And every choice they made was perfect. So, lots of people were calling them about action figures and cartoons and all this stuff, because when you sell 100,000 issues, and you're just a handful of guys, people notice. And everybody was actually looking for the next He-Man and stuff. So they were scrounging around anywhere.
And they had the right fans in the right places, and Playmates comes to them, hey, we want to do this action figure, but we also want to do a cartoon to sell the action figures. And they went and talked to them, and they hammered out what this version of the Turtles would be and all this. And the movies was the same thing. These Eastman and Laird just repeatedly found these people that were shockingly passionate about the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles to do these super respectful adaptions and stuff. And the cartoon was different, but I mean, it was awesome still. But then the movie that was like, yeah, we know the cartoon exists, but we're hardcore to the original comics. Nowadays, you can't even get an accurate depiction of Batman. Back then, they're like, yeah, Ninja Turtles, that's totally normal. And they did, they said, yeah, the different colored masks, maybe that's a good idea so we know who's who. But, they kept Splinter's original origin. It followed the first issue very closely to some degree. Anyways, having said that, no, that, and another example of how it can be done, Chaos Comics, Brian Pulido, that dude could sell anything to anybody. And he's had his rough moments like everybody did when the comic industry crashed in the late 90s. And he come back. Like, he's still doing it. It didn't stop him. And he navigated bankruptcy while holding on to Lady Death the whole time. He had to sell everybody else, but he held on to Lady Death because he knew that's all he actually needed. That's all he needed. He makes $300,000 an issue now. And
yeah, there was somebody had a Trans Am back when people still had Trans Ams.
Yeah.
At a comic shop I went to, oh God help me, 20 years ago. Beautiful Lady Death covering the entire hood of that car. And that's back when, she was truly, truly hot. And we got a conversation going on here, and I've been popping the messages up here and letting them sit. And I think this is something that's interesting to address here. Ezra's talking about how crowdfunding was supposed to be a vehicle to fund the project and get them into the stores.
Yeah.
And now it's become that the crowdfunding outlet is the store.
Right.
So they're not, they're not getting crowdfunded and then showing up at Cosmic Comics in Belleville or Big Apple Comics in New York. They're getting crowded and they're showing up on IGG, and that's the only place you can get them.
Yeah.
I think a lot of that probably, I wonder if that would have been any different if Mark Waid had not interfered with Richard C. Meyer and allowed Antarctic Press to pick up that book and put it in the stores.
Well, on the grand scheme of things, I'd say no. Not really, because for him personally, maybe, but even the other people that are in some stores with Antarctic Press and stuff like that, well, comic book stores are having troubles. And so, like my local comic book store, he barely carries all the DC and Marvel. He surely ain't going. I mean, when he gets a Dynamite Comics, like something from Dynamite, that's a big deal. He's getting crazy. So most of these, and you take those little town comic book stores, they make up the majority of comic book stores in the United States. They're not carrying anything off outside of DC Marvel. And there is a problem with that. There's the main reason nobody actually wants to stop doing Indiegogo, because the profit margin is ridiculous. And I saw a creator, he was like, they won't sell my comic for $10 or more than that, I think. Anyways, an issue. And I was like, well, of course they won't. No, a comic book is $3.99. If you can't make your comic for $3.99, you didn't make a comic. You made a whole nother something else. I don't know what it is, but it's more expensive and different. And so,
you made a boutique item, which is what he's arguing here.
Nobody wants to make $1 off of a dollar profit off of a comic. They're just not interested, and they want to make $20 profit off of a comic or more. Well, usually more. That's just how it is, and so they can't do that at a comic book shop. So I think the biggest hurdle between comic books getting to actual stores is, well, there's tons of things, but one of them would be the profit margin has to cut dramatically. You're going to actually have to sell comics. And that's another thing. That you have to have a plan to actually sell comic books, and that, I mean, you kind of look at the Dan Slott thing. He has to think about selling comic books. He's like, well, I want to say this on Twitter. Then fine, but there'll be repercussions. You could have said it. You could say all those same things, just not be so toxic about it. But I mean, indie comics, that is a huge deal. That no, a lot of these guys, even the best of the best, are probably not moving on to Marvel or Image or DC. And there's a good reason. They look just like any job. If you're going, half of these guys couldn't get a job as a night security guard because they check your Twitter. It's got a background check, and they go, "Wow, this person's crazy on Twitter." No, we don't want them here. They're toxic. And in some cases, no, these guys are actually probably normal. They just get a little out of hand on Twitter. There's the distance, we behave differently on Twitter, and nobody's saying, "Hey, buddy, chill out. You look insane on Twitter." Nobody's saying that. Everybody's feeding each other. And then they go, "Oh, DC won't hire me." No kidding. I can't imagine why not. No, because they look at these things. And now, is there a bias? Certainly. Dan Slott gets away with saying things that if it was on the opposite spectrum, there'd be more critical of. Well, this is not, but that again that's nothing. That is still not new. And in fact, like if Dan Slott, if it was 1995 and Dan Slott was saying that about whatever, I forget, maybe it's Clinton or something, he'd get in trouble if he was working at Marvel. He would have gotten big trouble for that. Or during George Bush, whatever the heck it is. It flips sides of what is right to say changes dramatically. But in the end, that is part of the job. And you see how many people, teachers and all this, they get fired because they said something stupid on Twitter and Facebook, and they go, "I should be able to say that." It's like, we should be able to, but we're also adults. Your career has to think about your career. You're
able to say that when you own your own business.
Right, exactly. And what is it? As a comic book artist and comic book writer, I'd say everybody needs to think about, whether it's Dan Slott or, me, what is your goal in life and what is most important to you? If it's saying what you believe at that right second on Twitter, then go ahead. But you're going to sacrifice everything else.
Yeah.
If it's to release a comic and express your ideas through art, you might think about that more often than just expressing your random thoughts at the time on Twitter. A little bit of self-control and stuff. And it's not saying not to express yourself. Dan Slott should, if something, he doesn't like what the government's doing. Well, that's the whole point of the First Amendment, is to criticize the government. Is the whole point. So he should do it, but he should think about not attacking just people. Focus on the government or whatever he wants to do. Whatever. There's good ways to say things, though, too. Also, because business is involved.
Yeah.
And if you're, and it only takes a little. It's not like anybody's asking some people are asking a lot, but they don't matter. But it's not like it takes. I see a lot of people go, "I got banned on Twitter again. Why does this always happen to me?" I'm like, I don't know. I do horrible things and never get banned. My God, I think it's kind of hard to get banned. I've never been banned before.
Hasn't happened to me. I've been blocked by a lot of people, but
oh yeah, that happens. But sometimes people are kind of childish. People are being very childish, and it don't matter if they're a pro comic book artist all the way to the bottom. There's people I highly respect because I learn about how they interact. I really like Jimmy Palmiotti. Jimmy Palmiotti has a great online presence. He expresses himself. He says what he thinks about politics, but he says it. He'll say a thing when he feels it's important. He's big on the environment and stuff like that. He'll say his thing and then move back to comics. You know, he doesn't push it every day. When he feels passionate about it, he says it, he moves on. He don't attack nobody. You know, he doesn't play with any of that. He's just saying, I feel we should do this with this or that. This is what I'm passionate about, and move on, which is very good. But he has restraint and he has focus on these things. And, you know, there's several other professionals and some indies, not a lot, but some that have some self-restraint. And, you know, I think that indie artists need to take themselves more seriously. I feel like they aren't. I don't think they feel like they're real artists or in this industry, or they wouldn't behave like that. They're not behaving like an artist or and in the case of self-publishing, they're a business owner, and they're not acting like business owners. They're acting like they act like they're working at 7-Eleven. That their comic book is 7-Eleven, and they just work there. You know how like when they're behind, I don't give a crap if someone robs this place. I'll let them burn it down for all I care. I just get paid minimum wage. That's an indie comic book artist, and they're their own employee. I don't care if anybody reads my comic or hates me. They can all burn in hell. It's like, well, those are you might.
Something about Twitter just brings it out to people. I've heard it explained that that Facebook is where we lie to our closest loved ones, and Twitter is where we're brutally honest with complete strangers.
That is so true. I kind of left Facebook. I started a one for saving the world, because that's the other thing. I'm trying to branch out because I'm so primary on Twitter. I tried Facebook. Posting something from Facebook is like trying to get a helicopter to start, like with all the switches and stuff. I'm like, could they make it more complicated? So I haven't had any success with that. But
then you come back to Facebook and it's not there.
Yeah, I don't know where anything is or who anybody is. But no, that is very true. That social media is one of the most social media. There's two things that have made indie comics be able to this is an unprecedented era in which anybody can become a comic book artist and express themselves no matter where they're at. That's the biggest change. If you didn't live in California or New York, you are not going to be, or maybe Houston, you're not going to be a comic book artist. It's just not going to happen. You have to live there. And this allowed anybody and everybody. And it's digital printing, which brought down how many you had to print and made them cheaper. And the quality is way higher compared to other cheap methods. So you could print 100 or 50 if you want, and it's no problem. That was a huge breakthrough. Social media, you could reach out and connect with fans in very dynamic ways and stuff. And that was number 2. And then crowdfunding. And those 3 things together created an era in which we can hear from so many different voices. It's insane. Before they went largely unheard, even if they got printed, there was a handful of Jonan Vasquez and Michael Dan Klaus and stuff, a few others. There's a handful that made it, but overall, people are ignored.
Well, I think social media is sort of like social media is the modern equivalent of being able to split the atom, because when you can split the atom, you can power a city, or you can blow a big fucking hole in something.
You could give power to the city or vaporize it off the planet. That is, it's 100% correct. You can either launch a career from the smallest town in the United States and become a well-known celebrity without ever leaving your house, or you could become the most hated person on the FBI's watch list. Once again, from never
career.
That's right. While never leaving your house, or you can just attack other people. You could destroy someone else's career. There's tons of things you can do with it, and I think that the biggest thing is indie comic book artists, underground comic book artists, whatever word or name they go by, need to take themselves and their brand much more seriously. They're not little kids just making macaroni and gluing it to that thing with a little bit of glitter. You're making comics. You're trying to express your art form. And you hear so little about that it's ridiculous. You hear about the paperweight. I got 70 pounds. Check that out. It's like, yeah, that is one thing that's, that's partially important. That should really be hindsight. Like that should be the last thing. Like, oh, I could make this kind of deluxe and stuff. And I see guys that do both. Like there's guys on levels like Matt Kotz, I want to say, with Kyrie. I ordered his book one. My God. He's selling his book for like $25 or something. This thing is this big old thick book with everything embossed and gloss, like parts of it gloss and some matte and all. It's the most beautiful book I've about ever seen. But and those guys, it's this artisan deal. But his art and writing is also magnificent. That art and writing should be more important and really be more of a focus, not just the materialistic of it is how much do you look like Rob Liefeld or something, or Jim Lee or whoever. People taking more pride in it, pride in what they do, and also expressing that thing. And that's where I said everybody should only bicker in comic book form. If it's worth saying, it's worth drawing a comic book about it.
Tony, I bet you that Tony Sizzle, I bet you that Crumb would probably have rejected the crowdfunding methods just because he was that counterculture. And by the way, I love you for bringing up Larry Wells. I have not heard that name in a long time. I only have one cherry Pop-Tart in my collection, and boy, I wish I had the other ones I used to have.
And they evidently didn't need, there's those, they're kind of like the Ninja Turtles, Maybe it was bad. Maybe crowdfunding is like crack for some people because, you see people withering away on Kickstarters and IGG when there's a little bit of worth ethic here. When you have to fight for something really hard, sometimes you're a better creator and a better artist for it. Indiegogo.
And if you
go on.
If you're doing it yourself, there's nobody at the house saying, it's time for you to get up and go work.
Right.
Or what are you doing sitting at your desk doing nothing? Or,
right.
Why are you just drinking coffee?
Right. Because, you have people who are, and sometimes, there's delays in comics due to printing, or especially if someone's waiting on another artist, like waiting on where they're the writer and they have, artist, or they're waiting or something. That happens. I mean, there's some organization skills that'd be there, but that happens. And I wouldn't say that like comics, those guys should be shot. It happens. It's no big deal. And we are not trained professionals here. It happens, and it's happened. Exactly. The Crow did not come out sequentially. It took him 10 years to release The Crow. In my opinion, one of the greatest underground indie, whatever it was, comics. It took some time, but it was worth the wait. However, having said that, there's a lot of people who they never started their comic. They kicked off a campaign with some little sketches that they commissioned and then hoped the money would come and then they pay for it. Or they got the money and just said, yeah, anyways, I just wanted the money, really. I'm cool. and they're just sitting on it. Omaha Cat Dancer. That's right.
Another classic.
Yeah.
I remember Melody, I think it was just Melody. She was a Canadian dancer. There's a lot of good stuff that came out in that time frame. And, you get married and have a kid and somebody finds your comic collection and suddenly you don't have anything.
You get in trouble.
Yeah. So that's why I keep my copies of The Blonde off by Franco Sardelli deep in the back of the boxes there.
And see, there are, and there's still some of those guys. A lot of it wasn't. A lot of the the fall of that industry was just financial. It went the way it went the way of Rob Liefeld and all them at Image. When the industry collapsed, the guys that got hit the hardest was underground, and they had that industry had thrived like crazy since the late 60s.
Well, besides which, the CCA went away, and anything you were seeing there, you could see on Vertigo now.
Right.
For crying out loud, you got Ant-Man and the Wasp having size-changing marital conjugal thingies, trying to keep it cute for the kids in a regular Marvel comic. So
and I think that was you saw partly there was financial that just crushed them. A huge booming industry can support really subversive, odd stuff, and once it shrank, it couldn't. But you're also right. When you had Marvel and DC, their hands are not clean, and they don't have to have a good industry to survive because they don't make comic books. They make IP that they make money of other things. So for them, they want the industry to be dead because they don't need to sell comic books. They need to make movies and action figures. And so, I mean, you look at The Fall, it was very much deliberate. It looks like they did it deliberately to crush the industry because other IP was being made into movies. I mean, all of a sudden, Batman petered out, and all of a sudden you got The Crow, The Mask, and a dozen other movies, Ghost World even, Daniel Klaus's Ghost World, dominating the theaters. And then all of a sudden, Quinky Dinky DC convinces old Jim Lee to come over to them and buys a lot of their creator-owned stuff and mothballs it. Oh, that's Gen 13 disappears. And Marvel is sitting there throwing money at Rob Liefeld to sabotage it. Yeah, they deliberately destroyed Image, or what it was back then, because they didn't like the IP being generated. All of a sudden, there was a Wildcats cartoon, not an X-Men cartoon, so on and so forth. DC and Marvel pretty much probably was in talks, saying, all right, you take out those guys because they're more susceptible to you, but we'll get that Jim Lee guy and buy his IP and we'll mothball it. And there you go. It was taken out. Now, the only survivors were, Marvel and DC. Well, how lucky for them. And they own everybody's characters. They own the people, the creators and stuff like that. That survived it.
What I'm hearing now from my local comic shop is that the DC's Generation 5, if that fails, DC has said they're going to get out of the comic book publishing business and go straight to graphic novels. And what he's also heard from the other retailers is that if that happens, Marvel's going to follow suit, which I've come to the opinion that if DC and Marvel, they're like these two giant trees growing up on both sides. They're like twin Yggdrasils over a regular forest of smaller trees. And if one falls and takes out the other, yes, that's catastrophic. But it's a literal not being able to see the forest for the trees.
Right.
Because if they both fall and it takes away all that shade on the shelves, people will say, wait a second, DC and Marvel are gone, but there are still lots and lots of comic books here. I mean, who's this? Who's this Amigo? Who's this Absolute? Who's this person here, that person there? I've never seen these books before. And it'll just provide light to all these other indie comic people.
And actually, it was the last podcast, or maybe the one before, I had said I very strongly feel DC and Marvel probably, they won't print comics, monthly comics. And I 5 or 10 years. I think it's still a while because it'd have to start. I'd be really surprised if it was 5 years, like 2025. I'd be kind of surprised it'd be that quick. It's inevitable though, because they don't need it and it don't make money. Their ad revenue. Now they'll act like, well, we have to charge $3.99. Now their revenue pays for that stupid comic. They just up the price because why not?
They have to keep the trademarks alive, and they can't do that through movies because they can't produce the movies quickly enough.
Now,
but they can sell a book every month.
Right, and they could do trades much like on a slower basis or something like that. No, I still don't. If DC actually goes through with trying to mimic Marvel's biggest failure, which baffles me. But if they try to do that and it, they decide, okay, we're getting out of it because we destroyed it in a very obvious way. Now we're upset. Now, I actually don't even think 5G needs to succeed or fail for them to get out of the print business. They're looking, or on that scale. Now, and yeah, I would certainly think that AT&T and Disney are looking to find someone else to do smaller scale print runs, because as their business model currently exists, they have to print this ridiculous amount of comic books to pay for the staff and all these types of things. But most of them are barely worth even printing. But then even some of them, we see in comics, whether it's Marvel or DC, they all have a similar problem as DC with their movies, in which, like, for instance, when they were doing Man of Steel and BVS and that kind of string of the DCEU, they were making money, but teeing everybody off. Like, the fans were rebelling against them, but they wouldn't die. And so they couldn't reboot. They were like, they're too successful to kill, but not successful enough to launch a shared universe, because it was like everyone was this turmoil. And, when Wonder Woman made a bunch of money and all this, it's like she suddenly hooked her wagon to, the rest of this greater universe. And DC's stuck with this thing of, boy, we can't really kill it because it's too successful, but it's not really as successful as we're wanting. It's not going in the direction we want. To where there's a lot of comics that Marvel and DC print that they sell no floppies because of the demographic. They wanted to get in young readers. That was the whole Marvel Now and 5G. It's attempting to get younger people, because all of us are going to die eventually, and they're sick of us.
No.
So they're like, we need some younger people so that when those old bastards die, we got someone to replace them. So that's their thinking. The problem is, young kids do not buy floppies. They will never buy floppies. It's not going to happen anytime soon. They only buy trade paperbacks collected. And that, it's really late teens and 20s are the only people they've ever accrued through their initiatives to get new readers. Kids at the schools, but those are kind of different. Well, and that only adds to it, because schools aren't going to build a comic book store to sell monthly comic books. It's Scholastic, and they sell trades. So exactly. The kids and late teens and 20s are all buying trades. They buy them, nice amount of them. So those comics geared towards them, Miss Marvel was one of them. There's a huge fight over those, because people say, well, Miss Marvel don't sell floppies, and that is very true. The sales are pretty not great. On the other hand, it sells good in trades. And so the other side that's for these type of initiative deals say, but the trades sell. Gotcha. It's like, well, yes, that puts Marvel in an awkward position, because they can't cancel it because the trades are selling. But trades are taking a huge cut on your profit, because floppies are supposed to pay your talent and make some profit with ad revenue and some of the cover price. And then your trades are supposed to be the cherry on top. What's happening now is they're losing huge money on floppies, because for one thing, a lot of these wages were decided during the boom. And so now they're paying artists and professional artists and writers these ridiculous salaries in a dead industry. That can't help. But then they have to wait a year until they sell a trade paperback. That is at a fraction of the cost. No ad revenue. And, that's another thing. The ad revenue, they get paid for how many. It don't matter how many trades Miss Marvel sells. That does not increase the per ad revenue. And likely Marvel does a thing where they combine multiple, like you're not paying per the comic you put ads in. I don't know. Disney likes to do that, where they and Viacom, where they're like, hey, if you want MTV, you've got to take MTV too with it. And everyone's like, we don't want to. Cable producers are like, we don't want to take MTV too. And they're like, well, you don't get nothing.
Yeah, and when the trade paperback comes out, like Matt just said, the ads aren't in there, so you don't get to collect ad revenue.
No, you don't. Yeah, you don't get to collect the revenue, and it doesn't count towards your what's that called? Circulation.
Yeah.
And so there is there's a little bit of a drawback there. And that, that is in the movie industry. It's like when they say, well, it made a bunch of money in China. You're like, but they don't get much of that. A movie making $1 billion, like where the movie only made 200 million here, but then it leaped over $1 billion with international. It's not as good because domestic money is, they get a huge portion of that. They don't get a lot of the overseas. So there's all these financials that are being tossed around that is very complicated with professional comics. And I very much see DC and Marvel start trying to get out of it or trying to whittle it down to trades only.
Well, people started writing their comic stories with the trade in mind, and every book became a chapter. Now, you don't see that in I'm going to say traditional publishing. For prose publishing, Stephen King tried that with The Green Mile. He started selling it, a chapter a month at bookstores. We could do that. And that was a novel idea that, people rightfully balked at and said, what the heck are you doing here? I'm not going to pay this for a chapter a month. Send me the whole novel or don't send it to me at all. Yeah. And it was, you haven't seen it done since in any other title because it just didn't fly with that market there. Yeah. But we've gone on long.
Yeah, we have.
We've talked about a lot of stuff that's not saving the world. While we got the people here, I want to say that we did get some nice little holographic Critical Blast stickers in the mail here. These are 3-inch stickers. If you'd like to have one of these, just hit me up in a DM at Critical Blast on Twitter, at Critical Blast. I'd be happy to send you one of these at no cost at all, just for stopping by. It's exclusive to all you guys who are here and seeing this video. Let me know, and if I run out, I'll just say sorry, we're out. But I'm not going to run out for a while, guys. We've been talking with Tonic Mole about supposedly saving the world.
Kind of.
I think we've been trying to actually save the world. Through comics, and his is going to be one of them. So if you'd like to hit that description below there is a link to the Indiegogo. Just has a couple of days left to get in there and get your money in so you can make sure you get your copy. The art looks great. That cover looks sweet. Illustrator Monk is definitely a guy you want to get on there. So everybody hit it up. I'm going to ask one more question.
Yes.
And then we'll get out of here. We'll be at 1.5 hours, which is a record for me on one of these.
Nice.
I have this image in my head of Mole from The Wind in the Willows sitting at the end of a bar mixing drinks.
Yes.
What's a Tonic Mole?
Okay. So this came, I'll make this story short, which is rare for me. So back in the late 90s, I was doing underground comics, So it was just the idea of, the comics I did was crazy back then. There's really subversive, more stuff like R-Crumb type deal. Anyways, so the idea come from the underground, and that's where moles are, and that's crazy. So Tonic was just generalized, So, I basically wrote this song called Tonic Mole Coming Out of His Hole, and the idea being an artist that has been pretty isolated, then coming out into the public type deal. Anywho. And then I just started using it online for no apparent reason, you just make up a name. But then over time, everybody come to know me as Tonic Mole. And now it's too late. So there's a
new tier there, music CD for those who give $1,000 to Tonic Mole Saving the World.
That's right.
We'll add that. You should add that here. You heard it here.
$10,000. Right. You get a music album.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for showing up tonight. We really appreciate you. Can't say enough how much we love having you guys here, listening to us talk about anything and everything and nothing at all. Please come back for more of this kind of jabber,
banter,
bickering. Banter goes on between Spider-Man and Mysterio. I always figured, but
yeah, it does
when they're fighting. But, if you like this kind of thing, you just want to sit back and laugh at us, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification so that you just get a little pop-up whenever we're going to be here. Can't tell you enough how much we love having you guys here. Thank you all, and have a great night. Tonic, we'll talk to you later. Good luck on getting that thing up to as high as you can.
Yeah, thanks, sir.